Welcome everyone to today's class. New York State Census records are the bomb. My name is Rhonda Hoffman. I'm the genealogy specialist in the Grosvenor Room, which is our special collections department of the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. The Grosvenor Room is open the same hours as the rest of the library, and you don't need to make an appointment to visit us unless you want to view a rare book. And our online catalog would tell you something is a rare book, and then you could just email us or call us and we would set up an appointment for you. The Grosvenor Room has genealogy, local history, maps, rare books, and music scores. So let's get on with our class. So today we're going to talk about some background info to the census, what information New York State censuses can contain, and how to access them. So census records are the backbone of genealogy. And look at how, if you add in New York State censuses, they strengthen it. So we've got federal censuses every 10 years between 1790 and 1950 are available for research. Then we've got almost every 5 years beginning in 1825 added in there. They did not take a state census for 1885. They skipped that year and went to 1892 instead. 1925 was the last year that New York took census records separately from the federal census. Unfortunately, there was a fire in the New York State Archives in 1911, and the state archives copies of state censuses from 1825 to 1905 were destroyed, but some county clerk's offices hold duplicate copies, so a lot of those are accessible. So I made this little chart for Western New York. So you can see only Cattaraugus and Chautauqua counties have surviving censuses between 1825 and 1845. And then most places have them from 1855 through 1925. Wyoming and Genesee don't have those for that time frame. So for Erie County, the state censuses start in 1855 for us. You do want to, if you are looking at these, you do want to pay attention to county formations. So the county where your ancestors lived might not have been formed until after some of these census years. So you can see that pertains to Wyoming County, which was formed in 1841 from the southern half of Genesee County and the northwest corner of Allegheny County, and a little bit from Cattaraugus County. So for any of those areas that existed for those other counties, those parts of Wyoming County would be part of those censuses. You do want to pay attention to those border changes as well as name changes. For example, Irving in Cattaraugus County was formerly known as Cattaraugus Village, and before that, LaGrange. And the town of Eagle was in Allegheny County from 1823 to 1846. And then there was a border change, which moved it to Wyoming County. And a place where you can find all of these little tidbits about border changes and town name changes is the New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer. It's published by the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. In the beginning of the book, you'll see information about all different types of records for researching in New York State. And then it goes county by county and gives a lot of more specific information. You can buy the whole book, or you can even buy individual counties if you're only interested in a particular county from them. We do have this book in the Grosvenor Room. So first, let's talk about those early censuses. A lot of, let's see, the 1825 and 1835 censuses are almost exactly the same in terms of questions asked. They're very similar to early US federal censuses, which name the head of household only and then puts other family members in age and gender categories. And in some ways, they're less informative than federal censuses, and in some ways, they're more informative. There are 2 pages of information for each family, and this shows the first page where you can see the head of households and all of the questions that are asked. And then this is the second page where they would ask questions about farming, industry, and other things. So there's less information in terms of age categories of individuals. So for males, it asks the whole number of male persons in the family, and that includes the head of household. And then it includes the whole number of female persons in the same family, including the head, if that person is female. Then there's the whole number of male persons subject to militia duty between the ages of 18 and 45 years old. And then the whole number of male persons qualified to vote at elections for state and county officers. Then the number of males who are aliens and not naturalized. The number of people in the family who are paupers. So that's something you wouldn't get in the federal censuses for this early time frame, I should say. Then there's a section on the number of persons of color. And so it's the number of persons of color in this family who are not taxed. Usually that's the wife and the children. And then the number who are taxed. Oftentimes this would be adult males. The number of persons of color who are legal voters. And I looked this up. I was curious about the definition of person of color for this particular person whose name is Humphrey Smith. And I was able to find him in the federal censuses. And this was an African-American family. And this is where we get a little more specific that is really helpful. So we have the whole number of married female persons in the same family under the age of 45 years. So that would be great. Maybe we've got some sisters-in-laws, mother-in-laws living with the family. Then the number of unmarried female persons between 16 and 45 years old. The whole number of female persons in the family unmarried under the age of 16. And then we've got marriage information. So the whole number of marriages where the female married person resided during the year preceding. So this would be the year before the official census date for whatever census we're looking at. If a woman was married, lived with the family during that preceding year, and then is now married and not in the household. Then the whole number of births in the same family during the preceding year, and that's males. There's a male category and a female category. The whole number of deaths in the same family during the preceding year. And we've got a male and a female category. I mean, how awesome is that? I know we don't have names, but at least we don't have to guess, did that person get married? Did that person pass away? You'll have to excuse my AI generated art throughout the presentation. I've been learning how to do that. So I put some images in this presentation. So these are going to have agricultural and manufacturing information, things like horses, sheep, cattle, the number of acres of improved land, yards of different types of cloths manufactured within the household. And then the 1845 census, there's 4 pages of information. So there is more information about agriculture. It's very similar to the 1825 and 1845. There are, one of the things it lists is the number of marriages in the family during the preceding year. And that 25 and 35 only lists that for women. So this doesn't distinguish between male or female. And this gives more detail about where the people were born. So it will say if they were born in New York State, New England, other US states, Mexico or South America, Great Britain, France, Germany, or other parts of Europe. It gives a lot of info on children's education, so what type of school they might be attending. There's lots and lots of agricultural information, all different types of crops that were cultivated, cattle and horses, cloth produced. There's lots of manufacturing. So if the family person runs a different types of mills, different types of factories, asheries, distilleries. Access to these early censuses are generally through family search. They're not in Ancestry. And to get to them, you just go to the search menu. And then you want to go to the catalog, input your county of interest, and then you can select the years. Oftentimes these early ones are grouped together. And then you just click on the camera. These early ones are generally not keyword searchable, so you do have to browse page by page, and you do need a free account to view the images in Family Search. So you just have to, start browsing through page by page. Native Americans were counted in 1845. There are separate population schedules for all reservations in New York, except for those on Long Island. So these different groups are covered: Oneida, Onondaga, Tuscarora, Buffalo Creek, Seneca of Cattaraugus, Cayuga of Cattaraugus, Seneca of Allegheny, Tonawanda, and St. Regis Mohawk. The data is very similar to the general population, but it doesn't include things like voting, citizenship, or militia service. These are online for free on the New York State Archives website. You can see they're grouped together by the different territories, and you just click on whatever one is of interest. You can browse right here on the New York Archives website with those little arrows. I find, they're scanned in pretty high resolution. I find, at least with my internet, it takes a while for them to kind of clear up. So I'll usually just download them. If you click download, it'll download the whole thing for whatever territory that you selected. And that's how I like to view them. So it's going to have the same look as the 1845 general population schedule. You'll have the head of household, but you can see those middle columns. They just didn't fill in information in those. And then there are these extra columns put on at the end. Usually there's a couple of pages of extra information that was collected. And I'm going to show you all of them in a second, but something that I think is really significant are persons from other tribes in the household, and it names those different tribes. I find these columns are hard to read. The handwriting is hard to read on all of them, but this is the type of information that they have. So there's extra info, the number of acres of meadow cut, things about number of plows and the value of the garden, and cultivated lands cultivated by others. So things that were rented to Caucasian. There's information about different professions. So farmers, mechanics, physicians, teachers, interpreters and translators. The censuses from 1855 to 1925 are the most detailed, and this, I think, is the content that makes other states jealous when they see this. What's awesome is they state the relationships to head of household for 1855 to 1875 and 1905 to 1925. And this is wonderful because federal censuses don't list those relationships until 1880. So we've got three extra censuses that have that detail. And so here's an example from the 1860 federal census, and we see the Benjamin Davis family, and we see someone named Patience and a number of children. And of course, Patience is listed as the inferred spouse, and that's what a lot of us would think. But if you look at the 1865 state census, it shows that Patience is in fact his sister and is not his wife. These censuses also list marital status, and federal censuses don't do that until 1880. My favorite thing about New York State censuses is that it provides the county of birth if born in the state of New York. And so that's for 1855 through 1875. And this is excellent information for this time frame because civil birth, marriage, and death records often don't exist until the early 1880s in New York State. So we often cannot find this information otherwise. So for the Henry Safford family, we see numerous places of birth, which gives us a rough timeline of when the family lived in different locations. So if we made a timeline for him, we can see, Henry was born in Massachusetts in 1805. His brother is living with the family in 1855, and it states that he was born about 1815 in Albany County. So probably if Henry was only 10 then, he would have moved to Albany also. His daughter Abigail was born in Orleans County in about 1833. His son Henry, the same county, 1838. His daughter Harriet was born in Niagara County about 1845. And then his son George was born in Erie County in 1849. And then in the 1855 census, something that's really awesome is that it lists how many years are you a resident of this particular town. So you can see here, the family was there for 7 years. So if we add that information in, then we know that the family moved to Buffalo by 1854. So it gives a little bit more information. And what's great about that number of years of resident is, for anyone, it's great. But if we've got immigrant ancestors, this could be very specific. So in Henry's household, he has a servant named Catherine who's from Germany. And it says that she's only been in Buffalo for 3 months. So, I mean, she could have lived somewhere else before then, in the United States, but maybe that's when she came from Germany. So it could help us narrow down a date, or at least, make a guess as to when she might have come. So I wanted to show you how powerful these records could be. This is my ancestor, James Close Bentley's Civil War muster abstract. It lists his residence as Willing, Allegheny County, New York, and his parents' names are listed as, it's John Bentley, and then his mother's maiden name, Mary Borrow, Borrow. So I found his parents, John and Bentley and Mary Bentley, in the 1855 New York State Census. And I started looking around the page, and I noticed just 2 houses above is a family Hugh Burrow, which obviously is very similar to borrow, and I found that very interesting. So I went backwards and I looked in the 1850 federal census, and there they are again, right next to each other. And this time it lists Hugh Burrow as Burrows, which is, even more similar to borrow. Then I began looking at where these folks were born, and I see Mary was born in Delaware County, New York. And, excuse me, then Hugh was born in Delaware County. And then I saw a couple of other folks on the page who were born in Delaware County, Delilah Woodcock and also Jane Brundage. And looking at Delilah's age, she was only 28. So you could kind of guess, well, I wonder if she might be Hugh's daughter or maybe the Bentley's daughter. And Jane Brundage, she's 59. Well, she could possibly be a sister to Hugh and Mary if they are, in fact, related that way. Then I looked at how many years they've been in this particular town. And John and Mary were there for 13 years. Hugh and his family were there for 9 years. Delilah, 9 years. Jane and her husband, 9 years. So I think it's a good theory that these individuals are connected somehow. Theories could be that maybe Mary Bentley and Hugh Burrow, Delilah and Jane are related through the Burrow surname, or perhaps Hugh and Mary are both Burrows, and maybe Jane and Delilah are related to Nancy, Hugh Burrow's wife. But so this is a really great lead for you to start researching if you can't find information about your family members, like Mary Bentley. I don't find a lot on her, but it gives me some other people to dig into, and maybe I could find information about her through these other families. There's marital status information. This isn't given until 1880 in the federal censuses. So we have now married, now widowed, now single for 55 through 75. How many children and number of times married is given in the 1865 census. And it's not just for women. I know in the federal censuses, we often see how many children has the woman give birth to, but this is of how many children the parent. Then, what's even more awesome is for 1865 and 1875, usually at the end of the election district that you're looking in these censuses, there are listings of marriages, and these often aren't indexed in Ancestry. You have to go looking for them. So this would be marriages that occurred in the preceding year. So the year before the official census date in whatever census you're looking in. So the official census date is June 1st, 1875. So these marriages would have occurred from June 1st, 1874 through May 31st, 1875. And we've got the groom's name, his age, his marital status at the time of this marriage, the woman's name, age, marital status, and the month and day of the marriage. Then we've got the place of marriage. We've got by a clergyman, or if it's not a church marriage, but you've got the denomination. And then also, if the woman was a widow, they would have listed the maiden name in parentheses. So down here, we see there's a surname Collin in parentheses for the woman and the last name Clifford. There are also deaths. and those are usually going to be at the end of the election district that you're looking in. So these are deaths that occurred the year prior to the census date. And we see the person's age and gender, whether their marital status, the date of death, where they were from, where they were born, I should say, if they had an occupation, and then it will say the cause of death. For 1855, there are some marriages and deaths listed, but they're bunched up together and they don't list names. So let me show you here. So the left side that I have boxed off here, that's the marriage information. And it gives the people's age, the bride and groom, their marital status, and the month of marriage and the place of marriage, if it's outside of where they live. So while it doesn't give names, if you see that the ages and the marital status are lining up, this could give you a lead as to where to look if you can't find their marriage locally. So, this was from Orleans County, and we see this first couple was married in Rochester. So, if that lines up, maybe you should start looking in Rochester for those couples' marriage. And then the right side of this, these are the deaths. And these have nothing to do with each other. They just smushed them together on the page. Again, there's no names, but we've got an age, gender, marital status. We've got occupations, where they were from. So their native country is what is supposed to be listed. Sometimes they might have listed another state here. And then the cause of death. So maybe you can guess, maybe this was one of my people. And if you didn't know a date of death, maybe you should start looking for obituaries around the date that these people who line up with your ancestor passed away. In 1865, there are separate listings for Civil War soldier deaths. These are mixed in every few pages. So usually you'll see part of an election district of the regular population schedules, and then you'll see a number of deaths. So in this example, Oliver Fitzpatrick was 36 years old at his time of death, married, a U.S. citizen. He entered service in September of 1862 as a private in the 100th New York Regiment and left service with the same rank and regiment, and he was a volunteer. Then there's more. He died in August of 1864 at Andersonville, Georgia, while a prisoner of war. His surviving friends are a widow and 2 minor children. He was buried in Andersonville, Georgia, and he died of starvation in prison. And I just wanted to show you what all those sideways columns were. So we have things like died after leaving service while a prisoner of war, killed in battle. And usually when you see they're killed in battle, you've got the place of death listed. So you can usually figure out what battle that was from the place. Died of wounds received in battle, killed by accident, died of accidental wounds, died of sickness acquired during service, died of sickness not acquired during service, and unknown. And then in terms of surviving friends, it could be a widow, dependent parents, parents not dependent, number of minor children, left no children, dependent sisters, left none dependent, unknown. And then body was sent to friends for burial. Then we also have Civil War soldiers listed in the 1865 census. So these, they're not anyone who passed away. It's just people who are currently in the military when the census was taken or who had been in the military during the Civil War. So the top one is people who are currently in the military. And it doesn't give a name, but it refers back to the page and line number that you can find them on in the general population schedules. So for example, this one that I boxed off can be found on page 22, line 32. He entered service in the 16th Massachusetts in March of 1862 for a 3-year term as a private, and he's currently in that same unit, but he's not been heard from for 6 months, so they don't know where he is right now. And then on the bottom is those who were in the war. And the one I have boxed off is found on page 18, line 31. He was in the 116th New York State Volunteers, and he started on September 6th, 1862 as a private. He was promoted to a 4th corporal. He had 21 months in service, and it says he was discharged on account of disability and wound in his left leg. And this is the type of information that you could find. His health is good. His health is permanently impaired. He has loss of fingers, loss of hand, and it will specify whether it's the right or left, loss of arm or foot or leg, other wounds, or without wounds. So you can really find a lot of detail. There's also mixed in the 1865 schedules are inquiries related to certain health conditions. So again, it doesn't list the name, but it does tell you the page and line number to look on. So at the top, it's that extra schedule. And it says that I looked the person up. So that's on the bottom, and it's Mary Elizabeth Smith, who was 25 years old in this 1865 census. And it says that she's had this disability for 24 years, and it happened by falling from her mother's arms. And it also says that she's able to do housework. 1855 and 75 also do have some health information. It's written in the last column on the population schedule. And then all of these have information about agriculture or domestic industry. So these are usually at the end of the election district that you're looking at, and you'll see the head of household name, things like the number of acres, the value of the farm, different crops that were grown, different things that were like domestic manufacturers, things like cloth. For 1875, there are industries outside of those domestic industries. So you might see a person's business name, things about factory and manufacturers and the types of materials that they have and their annual production. For 1865 and 1875 in the population schedules, it's kind of cool. It has professions, but then it has a column, number 15, that says if you work outside of the city or town where the family resides, you're supposed to name that city. So this is for Niagara, the town of Niagara. And you can see people as listed as working in Niagara Falls, and there's one down towards the bottom who's a jeweler in Buffalo. There's info about what kind of house, what their building materials were made of for 1855 through 75. I don't know why I find this so interesting, but I guess it does kind of help us picture our ancestors' life. The different materials that I've seen are frame brick, log, shanty, or plank. And there are instructions to the enumerators that tell how they're supposed to write things. And I'm going to give you a link in your handout to the different instructions to enumerators so you can understand all of the data that is in these fields. It also lists the home value for those years. It asks if they own land, if they're voters, and if they're a native to the United States or if they are naturalized, who is an alien, persons of color not taxed for 1855 and 65. And then you might see different comments by census takers. There are often at the end of the election district, there'll be these questions asked, which sometimes they're filled in and sometimes they're not. But one of the things that you might see are wages. So if your ancestor happens to have any of the professions that are listed here, you could find out, in this area, that's about how much they would have made. In this top example, we see there's remarks on the mortality of the year. So this is for the community as a whole. As a whole, was there some kind of epidemic or something? And this lists scarlet fever was the most prevalent in this area. And then on the bottom, it says remarks on the harvest of 1864. And it talks about that there was a drought in this area and how it affected the crops. So now we're going to get into 1892 through 1925. And I'm sorry to report that 1892 is kind of a bummer. It's awesome. It's awesome for New Yorkers because the 1890 federal census was burned in a fire. But there's not a lot of detail, but you can find your ancestor. You'll know where they lived. You'll know who's in their household. So these are a little bit confusing to look at. I drew a red line here to show you on one page, there's two columns. We're used to looking across a whole image in census records, but there's so little information that they have two columns on each page. So we just learned the person's name, their gender, their age, their color, in what country they were born, if they're a citizen, and then their occupation. The 1905 census. The 1905 through 25 are very similar to the federal censuses, but I'm just going to tell you, some little extra details. So it lists citizenship in 1905, and it lists how many years that they've been in the United States, whether they're an alien or citizen. So obviously that's great in helping you narrow down when your ancestor might have been naturalized. And it asks, for inmates of institutions only, what was their residence, their city or town of residence at the date they were admitted? So this is the St. Mary's Infant Asylum, and we have some of these folks who are from out of the area. The 1915 census also lists that citizenship information. So how many years they've been in the US, are they an alien or are they a citizen? And now for those in institutions, they're supposed to only list children under 1 year of age. They should only list their place of residence when they were admitted to the institution if it is a child under 1 year of age. But at least looking through Buffalo, a lot of the census takers wrote for anyone. It didn't matter if they were a child or not. They would list where they were from in this column. And again, it's only inmates of institutions that have that detail. 1925 has great citizenship information. So if you don't know where your ancestor was naturalized or how they were naturalized, in the citizenship column, it asks if naturalized, when and where. So they're supposed to write the year that the person was naturalized and then the city or town where they were naturalized. And this census taker didn't write all the information, but I wanted to show this as an example. So towards the bottom, there's three entries, and one of them says Buffalo. The next one says HUSB, so that's husband, and the next one lists father, so through her father. So women and children were often naturalized, just depending on the laws of the time, either through their husband or through their parents. So that's the case for those two women who are listed.
Would I be able to ask a question?
Sure.
Okay, going back, on the census where you had, where the maternity hospital, it said sister something. I've never been able to figure out, I know the sisters take different names on censuses. Are they the true name or their sister name that they took?
I don't know the answer to that. I can try to find out though.
No, I just wondered,
Yeah,
I might have to look it
yeah.
up, but I didn't know whether you knew whether they were required to do their real name, or is there a census with their real name?
I'm thinking it might specify in the census instructions, but I've never thought to look that up. So I'm glad that you had this question because I want to
I'm
look into it
sorry to
now.
interrupt you, but
Oh, not, oh,
something
not,
that I wanted to know and
yeah.
might need to do some
Hmm.
research on.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So I wanted to show you just another example of this citizenship information. So in this example, there's one that says Buffalo 1922, and then there's a couple of people, it says papers. So it says first papers. So that would mean that they started the process of naturalization but didn't complete yet. So they filed their declaration of intent but didn't complete the naturalization process yet. And then, I just wanted to show an example. So this is Buffalo. A lot of times you will just see in the town where the people resided that, the largest city is probably where they were naturalized, but this is just an example showing that this person was naturalized in New York City. So obviously that's a great piece of information. And the 1925 did also have um, the information about people and inmates. It was supposed to be only for children a year or younger, but in this particular example, they got super specific about everyone and they listed their address in Buffalo where they used to live. So now briefly, I just wanted to show you how to access these records in Ancestry. So Ancestry is accessible at every one of our locations. You can, if you bring your laptop to the library, you can log into the library's wireless and then use Ancestry. The records that I show you, if you subscribe to Ancestry.com, you can also get them in Ancestry.com. What I do, well, of course, I should say first, if you do a general search across all the collections, it will bring you back hits of New York State Census records if that's where your ancestor lived. But if you want to search a particular year, if you go into the card catalog, this is how I usually do it. I'll write in the year and then New York census. And then you'll find it. And I'll usually go to the one that is more broad. You can see there's Erie County specific here. I'll usually just go into the whole state. And of course, you can keyword search like normal. But I wanted to show you how to find those extra pieces of information. So if we go into Erie, I'm going to choose Buffalo. And you just can forward through to find those extra. You can see how the population schedules are listed as 1. And then see, just a couple pages later, here's additional information with those health concerns. And then here's the information about individuals who are currently enrolled in the military and who have been previously enrolled during the Civil War. And that's how they go. And then usually towards the end of this particular district, there'll be the births. I'm sorry, not the births, the marriages and the deaths. And you just kind of keep scrolling through. Let me show you, I'll show you another year. Usually you can kind of, sometimes I might go all the way to the end. So usually there'll be a lot. You can see there's the agricultural schedules. And sometimes you can look at the images to kind of tell the little film viewer to kind of tell where they start. So usually the second schedule will be that marriage schedule after they finish all the population schedules. And there's those marriages, and then it'll usually be followed by the deaths. And then you'll have the agriculture, and then 1875 has those industry schedules, which will be after the agricultural schedules. Does anyone have any questions about accessing them? Something else I can show you? Just know that you have to seek out those marriages and the deaths because usually those aren't indexed in Ancestry.